guidelines or the requirements of the other culture. And if you don't meet these rules of the other culture, you will definitely be misunderstood. That's very simple. The most important thing is the part of the information management. I had a good friend in Germany. She was giving, she was doing services for traveling people around the world coming to Bavaria, where I live. And we once had a group of US people coming to their stand, and then they'd been in the hotel at the reception desk, and they asked for good places to go. And they actually, I don't need this network.
This network is off.
And they said, okay, yeah, you can go to a little castle which is not far away. It's Neuschwanstein. And they showed them some brochures about it. And these people honestly asked, oh, I saw that Cinderella castle. Cinderella's castle. And it was built by Disney. And something wrong. This castle was first built by our king of Bavaria back in history when actually US was not there.
Disney stole it.
Huh?
Disney stole it.
Yes, Disney stole it. So yeah. So information management and the impression people have about what you're doing, what you're telling, is a very, 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 very important point. And you need to translate and localize your site in order to ensure that you get the message right. I've added some more points about this topic, about language versus culture. The important thing for me is, even so I live in Bavaria, which is a state of, or province of Germany, I live very close to the border of Austria and Switzerland. Now, whoever traveled already to Europe may understand if I say they are totally different. They speak German, yes, but people from north part of Germany don't understand them. I'm lucky I understand them, but they have a totally different culture. So we do even have translations or localizations of content within the same language. So it's all German. And there are also maybe some legal requirements. If you have a shop, for example, you may not be allowed to sell some goods in the other country. Even so, the language is the same, and the people from the other country are able to access your website easily over the internet. So you need to really look at your shop and say, oh, sorry, you are from Austria. I need to present to you a different shop. So these are dimensions of language, culture, and legal aspects, which actually come to a point where the whole language thing becomes a dimension in your website organization. And it's much more than just copying your content or create a second website which has a second set of information for your customer. So the first question, what is your need? Do you just need to have a translation, or you do really need to have a localization? Most of the people in our Joomfish forums who are complaining that Joomfish is not translating anything automatically, their need is typically just translation. They want to be able to provide their information or services to some other people with the with the less effort they can have in this whole process. They just want to give them a flag where the other people can click on. Full stop. Then you can use automatic translation. You just smiled already when I said the word? Yes. I think automatic translation is good if you are just providing some information. If you want to have anything which is related to any shopping, legal, or other aspect, you should stay away from it, because it's been wrong in, I would argue, more than 70% of the cases. So it works if you have a blog or some other kind of information, but even then, transferring the meaning is very complicated. Localization needs and requires effort. if you don't put in this effort and you're not willing to do that, you will have a very hard time in managing your website. So what you can do technically, there are actually 3 or 4 technical options you can do at all times. The first thing is you can just create another Joomla instance and just have a totally separated website. This works in some cases. For example, the shop might even work better because you have some of the requirements and restrictions are not related to it. On the other side, you lose some common information, or you lose the possibility to share information between the 2 websites. The question here is, are you going to translate the whole website, yes or no? Or is it just parts of the website? I've seen solutions in all flavors. I've seen solutions from websites translating the whole sequence, and each side page was translated. And I've seen websites which just translated parts of the content. It doesn't matter which kind of solution technically you use, like the Joomla core, multilingual translation, or Joomfish or others. It matters from what you need. Because if you are going to translate your whole website, it's far easier to have something like a copy, because then you don't have specific relationships and you don't maybe need to focus on these different website structures, and you can maybe divert these structures on a later stage. But if you want to share information only, for example, in English for an English audience, and on the other side you want to share totally different information for a German audience, then you need to think about that again, because then it gets tricky. And it gets even more tricky if you have a certain element in it which is information which is for both audiences. And then the question I ask our customers very often is, do you have a professional translator at hand? Yes, no. And that's really a yes, no, because the professional translators, they have such a very structured way of working with you that anything else what you're going to do is best based on their process. Because if you are compliant to their process, you will pay less. So, I don't know, who's working together with professional translators? Just volunteers, okay.
Volunteers.
So, yeah, okay, volunteers, but are you using any translation memory systems?
No, people.
People, okay. So if you use translation memory systems, then you actually pay only that piece of translation which is new. So if a translator is going to translate the same sentence in 4 or 5 languages, the first time he does that, it's going to cost you money. If he is going to do that a second time, third time, whatever, for another brochure and the same sentence appears, you're not going to pay for it. If the sentence is slightly changed, you only pay a slow part of the initial translation, because you can maybe 70–80% reuse of the words you translated once. And these translation memory systems actually store these translations and automatically suggest to the translator the translation they have already, because they want to ensure that everything what you do and what you translated will be consistent in the future. So the translator don't want to translate it new and new again and create new meanings of the same original sentence. And therefore, their process is totally different than from what we are doing typically ourselves manually. And if you do voluntary based, try to help your translators in also creating something which is like a translation memory, even so if you don't use the systems. But if they structure their work, you might be able to help them if you just rephrase some sentences and say, okay, look, this is now the same sentence as you translated before. Can you just verify if that still makes sense in the context? Because sometimes it doesn't make sense. Another thing is, who's running a website which requires you to have 8 character types? So like Chinese, Japanese, Arabic. No one? Have you ever used such a website? Who looked at a website in China recently? They are looking totally different from what we are used to. Yeah, it's just nothing there. So their layout, their structures, everything is different. So now the question is, can you solve this issue with a CMS like Joomla? Yes, you can. You can bind and organize all your models, all your templates, everything what you need according to the language. Using Joomla 1.7 is okay, works. Together with Joomfish, you get even a little bit more things which helps you to manage these translations more easily. So it's your choice. It's your choice to go for an automatic translation or to go to a manual translation. And it's also your choice in terms of speed and things like that. So you definitely need to identify yourself what your needs are and how fast you need to do things. There's one possible option you have, which especially for the volunteers is quite helpful. Use the automatic translations provided by AltaVista, Google, or others as a first brief introduction, and let your volunteers in the other countries who hopefully are native speakers rephrase these texts. And this is something what we implemented in Joomfish in one of the latest versions as well, so you can now just click and ask Google for a translation. Unfortunately, Google has switched off their API, so this service is not available for us anymore. But in general, it's possible to use these translation services to get at least a draft version of your translation. And then you go into the next phase, go into the next step.
So no longer, I mean, I've never used Joomfish, we're going to, but there's no way inside Joomfish to say, take this English written article, go to Google Translation Services and come up with your draft of Spanish.
The functionality is there. As I said, Google just switched off, I think, half a year the API, so we are not able to do that anymore in the simple way.
Okay,
So
we
we'll need to find out if I think there are some options. Maybe we have an option to get a special API code with Google, but this public API they had before, which we've been using, was locked down. I think they had too many calls in that one. I don't know.
We can still do it ourselves.
Yes, of course. So decide what the information need to be. Translate it. Do they need to be changed? That's also something some people don't really understand. They have translations in another language for culture. Maybe you need to change to add additional information. For example, here it's quite useful to have feet information instead of meters, because people in the US might have a trouble to just calculate it. So it's simpler to do these things. And also, and that's very important, which of the information you want to hide in which language. Lots of people are starting with creating their structure and their website in one language, and then when they start to translate the website into a second language, they come to the issue that they say, oh, now this information should not be there. So start to think about that in the beginning, because then you can simplify your process of creating the website more easily, because then you can maybe create additional categories or sections or whatever you need beforehand. So your organization of your content within the administrative interface of Joomla will be much more simpler. You will have less hassle in the end. Any minute you put into preparation at that point will be a good minute for you. Best practice. I show you some examples. I don't know. This side, yeah, it's great. It's totally diverse. It's a Joomla side. They're extremely efficient. However, it's Greek. You have no idea except that they're talking about football and soccer. So, yeah, their side is not translated at all. But there's a lot of things which you see in common websites. Now, a good solution for a translated website, that's from a product company. They sell certain things. When you see just their homepage is already translated and localized in different layouts. So having a generic organization of your site is one of these things what you need to have a look on. Really about the information, what you present is the second. And then I found a very interesting one. Yeah, I think it's Japanese. So you see here, if you look at these kind of sites, you actually see that their layout is totally different because their characters are just sometimes the sentences are longer or smaller. So they need to adapt. They need to have a more flexible, more fluent layout in order to be able to compensate the differences in the language strings and the characters, numbers of characters they have. But looking at that, you can actually see this works quite well. So in Joomla, it's very easy. Even so, if you have languages which are from right to left, like Arabic languages, Joomla can deal with all these things absolutely without any problem. It's a bit more hassle for the template designer to really ensure that they get this in their mind and they test that, because sometimes it's get a bit complicated in which module looks which phase, but it works in general. What I once tried to explain to a customer is the focus of audience in terms of what is your website's organization and what is your website structure. I've worked, for example, with the United Nations, who provided a website in 27 languages in Europe. And they had the big challenge that they needed to get in news from all of these countries by the local person inside. So they had 27 different layouts, 27 different structures, and a news management system which allowed them to submit news in their different individual languages, which being directly, automatically put into the specific version for their sites. On the other side, they wanted to have a very standardized and common part where the United Nations as organization has been introduced to the audience. So they really have this issue of having multiple groups, multiple audiences, the whole focus of information. In the end, they came up with a solution based on, I think, it's not 27, but a couple of more separated sites, because that's more easy for them to maintain. But it's a question of organization in that aspect. Being prepared. Yeah, I'm speaking about that the United Nations sometimes. One of the things what I hear quite a lot is that people say, oh, we cannot publish site because it's not completed. I would argue stop that thought. You will never be complete. If your site is living, you will always have a situation in which you have an article or an information only in one language. For your audience, it normally matters more that they have this information than that they don't have it in their language. So typically your readers will cope with this issue more easily than you. There's one thing what I want to achieve with Joomfish at a certain point is to implement something like a community translation process. That's a bit tricky to do, but that's definitely something we're thinking about, so that your audience can actually suggest translations for an article or for whatever on your site. I'm sure we'll come to that in the future. That's something what we have in mind quite a long time already. We didn't find a good solution for that yet. That's something we will do. And then, especially in the volunteer area, you can very easily ask your audience for suggestions to get these new translations done. In business areas, that's typically different aspects and not used. Use the separation of information only then when it's logical. So I see a lot of sites which try to separate, for example, their news streams for English, German, French, or whatever. That's quite, for me, unlogical. Because either you have a very regional content which is then logically put into regional news, or you have a content which you just have not provided in a different language, but it's general purpose. So whenever you have something what is general purpose, really think about this information as general purpose information for your audience as well, and don't try to separate or make it hard for them to get this information. And yeah, of course, use all available elements. What I mean with that is use also your graphics and images. We'll come to some examples later. It's very important that you also change images and everything in that respect. So yeah, United Nations, we spoke about that already. You see the list of languages they have, but that's the example what I want to do with images. Does anybody here in the room understand why I said this does not fit? Look at the URL. So from where is it?
Thailand.
Thailand, yes. So Thailand is...
Right-hand drive.
Oh yeah, there's something. Thailand is right-hand drive, correct. So an image with a left-hand drive car interior just does not fit. And you see, even a company like BMW has these kind of issues. So it's not a huge failure, but you need to think about these things. Now comes the question I've been asked often, very often. How can I deal with the duplicated content set? Well, we just spoke about the fact that Google offers a translation service. Even so, you do everything right in your URLs and everything, you separate everything. Google will know if something is just translated or not, because they read the content of your website. And they translate everything back to English and compare it in English. So if their statistical translation back to their reference say this content is duplicated, it will be duplicated. They don't care about the fact if you really make sure that there are two different domains and everything in the URL is different. They will just know. But the only thing what you can tell Google is, hey, Google, this is a translation for my customers because we care more about the customer than you. And that's what we do actually, because we change the language tag inside the HTML code, and we actually tell Google, look, there's a reference to the other article. So, in that case, you just don't need to worry about that anymore. Google will understand that. Google will see, oh, they think about their customers. Okay, let's see what the customers think about. And if you get links, incoming links to the different versions of your translations, and you, for example, check your sites and PageRanks and other statistical tools, you will see that both of these sites have very similar PageRanks and very similar statistical benefits from the search engines. So they are actually ranked quite the same because Google understands that's the same page. So make sure you focus on these things more on your customer rather than on Google or other things. The other thing, what is important for me is don't confuse your customer to do something in something specific way. Typically, your customer is smarter than you. So he goes on your site. If he changes the website to another language, then this should be good. We do have customers which ask us to implement something which is called GeoIP determination of where people are. So yes, we are able to use a GeoIP service to say, oh, you're from the US, so we suggest you the website in English. Now, if your customer wants to see your website in German or in Spanish, well, yes, he could be here, but actually the cookie he sets on his browser saying, I want to see the website in German, should be more important than the GeoIP setting, because he knows why he wants to read the website in German or in Spanish. And maybe he lives here in the States and speaks only Spanish and has no idea about English. And I heard rumors about Miami that there are a lot of people who just don't speak any word of English. So yes, it might be a good idea to let the user choose these things, not force them to do something. Yeah, the other thing, the last thing, what I also have experienced already, people having just a copy of the whole website just to have a second language. This doesn't make sense either. So yes, if you want to have a second language, there should be a need for it. There should be customers interested in that language. Just to have a second language doesn't make sense. Yeah. One of the most powerful things in Joomla people very often don't understand is the menu structure and the navigation limits you have. So it's the separation Joomla has between the management of content and the menu structure as a navigational structure. The Joomla 1.7 implementation is actually based on that separation very heavily. In general, if you bind a module or any other element, like a template or whatever you have, to one of the menus, you have a very distinct link between the navigational structure and the whole set how your website looks like. The whole information being presented on your site. Now, if you change this menu item to be, for example, for English, for Spanish, for German, whatever language you want, then you can do a change in the modules, in the templates, and everything what you want linked to that new menu item. Because now you have a copy of that. In Joomfish you don't have a copy, but still you can change in the translation the relationship to modules and anything else. So this navigational structure as the tree of your navigational flow is one of the most important elements in your whole flow of the user. And to what kind of content? To the same category, to different categories, to totally different structures or components even, doesn't matter. You can have two totally separated shop systems, for example, if you want to do that for two different countries or languages. It's possible. And it makes maybe sense. So don't limit yourself in thinking, oh, that's my structure, this needs to be the structure or the logic in the other language as well. No, you're free on that point, and make use of that. The point about the special ID information, section categories is the old term, still with the nested categories, we have the same thing in 1.7 as well. Very often, people misunderstand that the categories there are something for you to manage your content. And it's sometimes easier, especially if you have external people helping you, to give them one specific category and say, okay, all your information goes in there. Don't worry about how I'm going to present it, but you focus only on that category, because that's the category you are working with. So if you change something, change it in that category. Don't worry about all the other categories. Now with the new ACL, you can even limit that to the people. It's getting more complex, but it's possible. So these kind of things, really think about the structure of how you manage your content on that aspect as well, and use the possibilities you have to simplify the management for your people helping you with the translations. So let's make multilingual sites. They're fun. We have, what did she say, 4:15? Cool. About half an hour we have time to play around. Unfortunately not with the Joomla 1.7 version yet, but we can play around with the 1.5 version and with the Joomla 1.7 parts. So what I wanted to show you before is some part, okay, Google Translation and the other translations extensions, we spoke about that already. What is Joomla 1.7 doing? In Joomla 1.7, there's a new language element being introduced in all of the menus, categories, articles, modules, actually in most of the tables which have something to do with content. This language tag is kind of optional for you to use. There is a default value which is called all, and if you use all, then you can create a website in one language or as many languages as you like. It doesn't really matter. This field has the meaning of giving you a filter option inside your language to present content to your customers. It's just a filter, nothing more. This actually means this is very, very, very similar to a parallel website. Now, the typical process of managing multilingual websites with Joomla 1.7 was built on the requirement to have a blog, and inside this blog there should be articles of different languages being posted, or if I have a list of articles there, which is in one language, I can show a second list of articles in a second language. There was no need, or the fundamental requirement was not related to a translation process or anything like that. Now, the obstacle or the issue what we have at the moment is you lose the, let's say, kind of reference. If you have a category, and inside this category you have an article called "Welcome to my site." Now, if you copy and translate this article to "Willkommen zu meiner Seite," as it means in German, and you keep it in the same category, show the category, everything is still fine. But if you are going to translate the category as well, you later on have to think about to move this article to the new category. And at that point, the initial category and the new category, as well as the article, they lose their relationship. You don't have any idea anymore that they are somehow related to each other. So if someone changes "Welcome to my site" to "Welcome to our business," someone has to think about that there was a translation. And this someone typically is Joomfish. Joomfish keeps and preserves these relationships between the original and the translations. However, in the current implementation of Joomla 1.7, we are not able to inject the Joomfish technology in a way that you can keep on using both parallel. So you will have to decide either to use the Joomla technology of translating and having multilingual sites, or the Joomfish technology, because the Joomfish technology just works totally differently. Yeah. Well, another point what is done by Joomfish, it allows you to involve external translators without the need of giving them access to your admin interface. So they can get a front-end translation tool where they can translate from any language to the language they can translate to. So they can use either the German or the English or the Spanish original and translate from that into, for example, Thai. That's no problem. And you can organize that. That's one of the other things. And it's really the focus on the translation process. So Joomfish really focuses on there's an original change. Now let's inform or give the administrator a chance to understand there's a change. You might want to verify your translation. So let's go to Joomla 1.7. Any questions so far? No? You all fine?
You probably mentioned it, and I probably missed it, but when is Joomfish for 1.7?
I've not mentioned it yet. It will be out sometimes. No, it will be out sometimes. No, we actually do have an issue with the power of resources we have. And so at the moment, the other thing was that between 1.6 and 1.7, there were a lot of changes again. And finally, in 1.7, we find that some of our suggestions being implemented. So we now with 1.7 finally have a chance to do some of the implementations first. As 1.7 is an unstable release, as defined by the Joomla team, we actually have a little bit headache. Yeah, there's it's stable, but it's called not as official long-term release. So yeah, it's quite hard to develop against 1.7 because you never know what happens with 2.5. And we have a version which is prepared, and we will likely release very soon.
Like a simple version?
But
Like more of a simplified version?
no, the version will be a full-featured version from Joomfish, but we actually will not recommend using that version for professional sites, and will recommend to wait for 2.5. And we'll definitely work quite hard to make sure that very close to 2.5. So there's one. When is it? November 16th? You said yesterday.
January.
Huh?
January.
Yeah, but when is the feature freeze?
We start merging in November and
Yeah.
then 1 month, so sometime December.
Well, when you merge, you start already with freezing, right?
We merge for 2 weeks around, so 8th of December should be closed.
Yeah. So latest then when we have a very stable system. Yeah, we heard yesterday that some cool stuff will be released next week, so maybe even that cool stuff will be implemented, then it changes our whole perception. So we definitely need to see what's coming up there. So we're a bit careful. I have done too many changes on Joomfish already because Joomla core changed. So I'm a little bit sick and tired of that one, to be very honest. Not only sick here now, but later.
Maybe plans to add in like XLIF capabilities for.
We have that for professional users.
Do you?
Yeah. We are currently, we have a partner in Germany who helped the Typos 3 teams to implement the XLIF. We implemented the XLIF in a slightly different way than XLIF is being done, because this partner who's professional in that area, and we are not, definitely, this partner told us that the XLIF standard is primarily being interpreted by all the translation memory systems differently. And he suggested to us a slightly different focus. But it should work in all of the standard translation memory systems to import and export. What we're currently having an issue with is the process of importing again, because when you want to import, it's quite important for the translator to have something like a preview. So we would need to create another draft version of an article, which we are not able to because of Joomla standard settings. So that's something where we are working on at the moment. But in general, we do have a possibility to export into XLIF. Any more questions? Okay. Well, whoever used the Joomla 1.7 multilingual features yet? One? You're happy with it? Yeah, you're happy with it?
But you said happy or haven't?
I said happy.
I haven't used it.
Ah, okay.
I thought you said you have. I think you said who hasn't used it.
No, I said who used it already?
Joomfish 1.0.
No, what for the Joomla 1.7 language features?
Oh no, I don't know about language
No.
features.
Okay. So now I'm most likely to be kicked out again. I have to be honest, I'm having a hard time with that. Always all presented. So this time I tried to be a bit more prepared. I've set up the site already completely. So the Joomla system of language management starts with this new table here, which is the language content. It's a table which actually allows you, independently of the front-end translation files you have installed or the back-end translation files you have installed, to manage content languages. As many as you want. Okay, this is a good concept. We copied that for Joomfish. So the 2.2 version of Joomfish for Joomla 1.5 is already using the same principle, which will make your merging or migration process to Joomla 1.7 or 2.5 later more easily. What you do here is a very simple thing. You just define a language by a title, a native name. You give it a short ID for how the URL should look like, or the extension of the URL should look like. You define the front-end language language tags if you have them, or if you want the front-end language to be linked to anything. Does everybody know what I mean with front-end language files? Yeah? Okay? So yeah, in Joomfish in the past was required that you upload these front-end language files because it doesn't really make sense, in my opinion, to have a website which is translated to, let's say, Spanish, but you still have English or German breadcrumb information or other information which are standard information based on the Joomla translation files. So this was a relationship I made. It's now broken, or not that strong made in Joomla 1.7, which is, yeah, a possible different approach for me. I can live with that. The other thing what you need is to have a plugin, which is a system plugin called the language filter. This plugin actually is nothing else than an SEF based plugin trying to interpret URL and parameters to switch between the different languages you have on your site and enable the filtering, what I said before. So as soon as you now put in articles or other information in the different languages, this plugin will always enhance all of your queries with the language attribute. So as soon as you switch this on, you have an either-or situation. Either you have an article being marked in one language, or it's not presented, except this article is being marked for all languages, which are the three options we have. But if you switch that on, there is a module, which is all the simple one. Here it is. This module actually is this language switcher. So that's nothing else than this small little presentation of the flags or names or whatever, how you want to style them. Of course, module has a view. You can override this view, whatever you want to do. Now, based on that, you can switch the languages. You can see the language is changing. You see up here the URL is changing based on the extension you gave to the language. And you see different information here. You have translations or you have totally different menus like I created here. Now, this would be the easy part.
That's in 1.7, that
That-
module?
yeah.
It comes with 1.7?
Yeah, that comes core with 1.7. So far, that's the easy part. Now the hard part comes. You see here that there's now a main menu with a marked English flag, and there's a Hauptmenü, which is main menu in German, with a German flag. And the default menu here has a dummy. Now, the Joomla system requires you to create a very unique kind of structure in your menu systems and what is your default page on the different sites in order to manage these things. So you actually need to go through the hassle of copying and moving all these information so that you can change these information, like, for example, this home menu dummy. If you want to have your primary menu being called home, you even need to change the name for that. This one is, for all languages, a home menu. And then you create, for each of the menus, or each of the information you have, separated menus with all the links. Yeah, your eyes going up, right? Now it starts that you start to separate your navigational system based on the language. And as I said before, on the navigation, everything is bound. So now it starts that you separate your whole site in the two languages.
So the parks in German doesn't know that parks in English is the same article.
Yes. Yes. So this is kind of the tricky version, kind of the tricky issue. So now that's still Joomla 1.5, but as said, the 1.7 version is very similar from the process of all. Within Joomfish, you also have this language selection menu, like everything else. Of course, you have that. You see, it behaves the same. You have a different URL. We need to have a language identifier. This URL change here is the identifier, of course. And you see here, there's some stuff changing, of course. But now, how does it look like in the backend? In the backend, you have only one menu system. And if you go, for example, here's the home menu. If I look in German, that's called Start. You see, here's only one home menu. There's not a second home menu. What you can't do at the moment in Joomfish in the current version, but some people are already having good ideas how we can implement that, is to easily switch between the languages, or to filter here in your list to see the different translations, or just to say, let's switch that. But what you can do is you can just mark, your menu, and then you have a translation item up here. And if everything goes well, you have your translation right here into your in your front end. And there you have the link. This translation of the menu is always linked to the original home menu. So now, this is Start, everything is fine. If I go to the translations here, I see even here in Joomfish, there's a home menu which is translated to something which is called Start, but the state is not 100% valid yet. This is because there was some change or something is not completely filled out so far. If I now copy all of this stuff here, it's quite likely to be below here the parameters or the link. Now you see that the state is complete. And the state, you see, okay, this is translated. If I now go back to the menu and change something in here, for example, I change the type to be something different, or let's make it a bit simpler. I change the alias. I see back in the Joomfish translation that this state here is changed. So this is actually what Joomfish does all the time. It supports you in the management of your translation. It supports you in the link and the references of your translation. And it is not a tool which is doing any translation stuff automatically for you. It's very simple in its ways, but actually it is able to link the original article with the translation and keep this reference for you all the time you need it. Now, some people come up with very crazy number of components and extensions. I think we have about 5,000 in the extension store. So, yeah, we have something which is called so far a content element, and I'm not sure, I have not had a better name for that yet. Any suggestions welcome. This is actually our mapping file, which gives you the information about how we do map the information inside the original table to a translation. So with Joomfish, you can translate any of these 5,000 extensions, and you don't even need to talk to the developer of this extension. And this developer does not even need to implement something like a language field. It doesn't matter. You just can translate them because of these mapping files, and these are XML files, which you can write yourself because it's a simple view in the database structure of this extension to see what he's doing, which fields need to be translated and defined, and that's it. The other thing, what makes Joomfish quite, I would argue, interesting, is that we have some more additional add-ons in our club area, which, like what I mentioned before, have the GeoIP determination where you are, or the fronted language things. The Joomfish community in the club is very, very, very communicative. It's sometimes hard for me and the other core members to keep up with the posts. The forum there is a very positive forum. We're absolutely interested in any feedback and what people want to have and try to improve. On the other side, I'm a very, let's say, well, you can say German guy maybe. So I try to stay away from fancy new things. If someone like comes up with XLIF, for example, my first question backwards is typically, so which tool you're using on the other side to get the people really think about it, because a lot of people just use these kind of buzzwords. And a lot of people have no clue about what they want to achieve with XLIF. They just heard that this is a good format and they should have that. We have not seen, we have a feedback area. The most important feedback we get there, what people want, and we're actually working on that, is a tapped interface to have a possibility here in the translation system to automatically translate into multiple languages directly from here. Now, with 1.7 and the whole JSON thing, which is now implemented, I have a good chance to implement that. So we're working on that one as well. There are some other ideas what we have, what we want to implement soon. As I said, the big question here is the flow Joomla itself has. The Joomla core team, especially people like the white t-shirt guy in the back, I forgot your name again, sorry. You're working in the JBS, right?
Yes.
So he's one of the guys who fixing all the bugs, verifying the patches if they really fix the bug or if they just don't do something silly. Thanks for that, and thanks for the new release plan Mark and others introduced. We come to a point where, as an extension developer, the long-term releases are really releases we focus on. I think what we all, as users of Joomla, need to step back again a bit is that we want to be in the first line of every single first new release and use that on our website. So, especially if you maintain bigger sites, the long-term releases are definitely the versions you should look for, not the versions in between. That's it so far. Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I ask a question? No.
Of course.
No, not here. Do you mind? So, so this our little site's built, and it's for women in crisis or abuse, and we recognize we have several communities, some Asian communities, Spanish communities. So not all the pages are going to be translated, but some of the key ones are. So when I install Joomfish, can you just kind of show us how? Do I just go to my old article and below it is where I do the translation? And is that too simple a question?
Find my mouse again. So this is core Joomla,
yep.
And it's core Joomfish. So there's no additional money required. Everything is free. Everything is there. And I'm being asked quite often, Joomfish 2.2 is not released in general public yet. Yes, okay. Well, you have SVN access or you have GitHub access. Just grab it from there, install it. So we don't push all the packages into general public until we get some sort of feedback. So we have it within our club memberships where you can get it, but you don't need to have club membership to find the latest releases. That's a very important thing. So, yes, let's log into the website. You have defined your website, and I think that's the most important thing what you need to define and think about. The website has a default language which is called English. This default language for Joomfish means a lot. It is, in all cases where we don't have a translation, our fallback. But Joomfish does not translate an article as a complete article. It translates and stores everything what you have translated. Like, for example, if you translated the introduction of the article, but not the full text, Joomfish will just store this introduction and on the full text fall back on the existing one. So you might have an article which is German and English combined. So this especially comes handy when you think about the parameters. You don't need to copy all of your menu parameters and all that kind of stuff for all the articles or menus while translating. You can even override it with translations, but you don't need to. If you are not changing that, you can always fall back. So, in terms of how to manage your translations, the information about the menus or the information which is here in the modules are typically information which are not being translated by external people. So you typically try to do that by the Joomfish backend. So the most logical way is, let's take for another example here, the latest news module. You go to your module manager, you look for the latest. We have the latest news. You click it. Yep. Oh, there's something changed. I go the Joomfish way. I go to translation. I say I want to translate into German. I want to translate modules.
Oh, you do it
Then I have my latest news. So typically I get the same kind of, I have 10 minutes.
there. You got it. Oh, it's
I'm fine.
Thanks.
So typically, I know what, I installed the advanced module manager from the guy in No Numbers. So that's why my module manager is different. This doesn't work. If I have a standard module manager, I can do this and come to that screen directly in the module manager, like I did it with the menu before. So I have the change of the name. I copy all of my parameters here. I say this translation should be published. Of course, I can say the translation is not published and only managers, publishers can publish a translation. And if I look here now, this is translated into German. That's the simple part.
Very simple.
So now comes the more simple part for our volunteers and external people. I have an article like here, the Joomla community portal. This article is in English, my main article. If I go here into editing mode, change something, save that. He tells me it's safe. So I see here it's the English version. Now, if I go to German again, I don't see that. Why? I have a translation for that already. If I go to content, that's now wrong. Actually, what should happen is that this is a different article. So, I switch here. So now I see the both versions. What happens is, in Joomla front end, if you go to the translations or to the other side in the different language you want to translate into, Joomfish typically presents you the original English version. And there's no other version what Joomfish provides you. Here's your article. So if I go now in here and look at the translations, you see this is the original text of the article, and that's the German version. Well, the question is now, where is my English version? And I assume there's something wrong in the settings. Because there was a test which tried to achieve that before. So there's a very, very rare situation in which you have a website which has been written by many people in different languages. So it could happen that an original article is being automatically and in standard being written in English from one person and Spanish in a second person. But they still put in all these information on the side. Then at that point, you don't want to mess around with copying information from one side to the other. You just want to translate and ensure it's being available in both languages. It's possible in Joomfish, you can do that, but it's a little bit more complex in organization. If you don't do that, you have typically one default language, and this one default language you have is one you stick to, and you write all your articles for the default stuff in this default language. So it's been always standardized, written in English first, and then translated to Spanish. It simplifies your management. It doesn't do anything technical. It's just for your simplification. So Joomfish has the possibility, and we have the English version here, to do this both. You can switch up this information as well. So actually I can delete this translation into English. Now I see the normal version again, which is the version the content was written in first.
So you kind of made an English version of your English version.
Yes.
In a way.
But if your original was Spanish,
Exactly.
then it makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
So, and the typical way of translating is like here. You go in the article, and here you see automatically the. It seems like this version has some bugs.
But we get it. I mean, it would open up with the original version and then we type the translation below.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some stuff going on where we get feedback from users how this translation interface could be optimized. But in general, it is the way you see the original. You have below in fields to enter the translation so that you have always both in the same thing. The demo site from Joomfish you know that there's another network with an open VLAN?
It's not this one?
Yeah.
But that's this one, that's true. But there's another one network which is open and works. So this is just our demo website with everything. You see here the crazy languages we have installed and been able to manage as well. So if I go back to a little normal language, so this is the Joomfish Translate, the front-end translation system. And here you can actually say, okay, now what I want to do is I want to translate into German, because I'm a translator into German, and I want to translate contents. And you see here, I can look at the languages and say, okay, I would like to see this information in Danish or in whatever French or Spanish, and like to translate it into German here. And that's actually, this is what the front-end translation tool does. And this is the most convenient way, even with access control in Joomla 1.5 already, if you have volunteers and external people helping you. On the other side, the guy in the back, your translator will not use it. They want to have XLIF, they want to have their files, and they are not interested in going on a website to do these things. They send you files back. But for the volunteers, everything this works well. If you have any more questions, I will be here for a little bit still. And anything else, you can reach me here. The slides are being available on the Joomfish.net website as well. There's a download link in the documentations. You can find them there as well, so you can review the information. If you have any questions, send me a mail, contact me on LinkedIn, whatever you want. Yeah?
I think I missed one of the important parts somehow. Like without using Joomfish, while using a Joomla code, if we have to make two default languages, one for say Spanish and one for English, how to do it? Because usually it gives an error.
How do you mean two default languages?
I mean, when you click on the Spanish language or any other language,
Yeah.
it should load that particular home page.
Yeah, it should. What you need to do is you need to create these menus for the different languages and define for each of the menus to which languages they are related to. You need to have one dummy default menu item which is a home page and is linked to all languages. And you need to have, for each of the, you need to have menus for each of your homepage languages in order to get that working. The big problem is you will not see any of the localization features until you have 2 homepages in your 2 languages. After that, you see actually all these kind of flags and other information like here. And then you can actually link these information, and you can link each of the information as well as each of the articles by this language field here. And then you can start separating the content.
So can you have these 2 menus in the same, 2 menu items in the same menu? Or
it's not, no, need to be separated in 2 menu systems, which is actually causing the whole issue of separation, because then you start already, you have 2 different modules, you have 2 different structures, you have 2 different references, and then it starts getting very nasty when you start to have a big site. For example, one example here, which I even looked, and that's just a standard installation. But when I looked at the About Joomla, and you look here where it is being, well, that's the English version now, and if you look at the About Joomla where it's all being linked to, now if you start to link these language-specific menus to certain structures on your site, yes. Laura tells us this was the last question.
Did you hear what I just said? I said that. No.
No.
It's a little bit after. It's about 4:18. So at 4:30, we're all going to be back in that other room for a really great final session. So get your energy back going. I know it's tough at the end of the day. So Alex, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I survived.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's a crazy one. There's in Germany, there's a show for kids, a TV show for kids. And they recently explained.
I'm shutting it down, right?
You say safe.
Oh, all right.
It says stop.
Because I'm just, as I said before, I
Yeah,
just